So, well, once again, welcome everybody to session 3 of this meeting. Well, I have the pleasure to introduce Robert Mangani from the University of Pretoria of South Africa, who will tell us something on planting days of maize in the view of climate change. Robert, please, you have the floor for 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Robert Mangani, coming from University of Pretoria, where I'm a postdoctoral fellow. And this work was done in conjunction with our collaborator from, which is Dr. Gan from West Wisconsin, Green Bay in America, as well as my postdoctoral advisor, who is Dr. Nikki Crew from University of Pretoria. So the title of my talk is Climate Change, Effect on Planting Dates and Cultivar Choice under Dryland Maize Production. So I'll start by giving you a background, some background information to this study. So maize is one of the most significant crops in South Africa, serving a dual purpose. We have got the yellow maize that is used for as a grain feed, as well, and the white maize that is used as a staple food. So that South Africa is a net exporter of maize, exporting its most of its maize to the countries around in the Southern African Development Community, that's SADC. And maintaining maize stability is of great significance to the country, as well as the because in order to meet the demand within, as well as that of the export. So among the impacts of climate change on maize, there is unpredictable and variable rainfall, which is a challenge here, and longer dry periods during the growing season, delayed summer rains, increasing temperatures, increasing frequency of heat waves, and early onset of frost. So all these, they have an effect on yields that the farmers produce. So existing evidence has shown or is showing increases in Tmin and Tmax, that is the minimum temperature as well as maximum temperature over all parts of South Africa. And this is worrisome because it affects production. Effects of warming, they are manifested in the growing seasons, which become shorter, resulting in lower use of radiation, water, and nutrients by the crop. And at the end, that results in yield penalties. So it's important to examine temperature anomalies, water deficit periods, and frost occurrences during the corn, the maize growing seasons, so that we can be able to prepare for the future. And it's equally important also to examine adaptive options, especially the agronomic management that can be put in place in order to buffer the effects of climate change. So this brings me to the objective of my study, which is to evaluate the impact of climate change on different maize developmental stages at two different sites in South Africa, which are Lichtenburg and Bloemfontein, using baseline, near future and distant future climate data that was generated using 2RS representative concentration pathways, 4.5 and 8.5 scenarios. And we employed cultivar choice and planting date as adaptive measures. So we therefore hypothesized that onset of frost dates will favor early maize planting dates, as well as early maturing maize cultivars. Secondly, the rate of accumulation of growing degree days for the two studied locations will be enhanced in comparison to the existing rate. Thirdly, the hastened growing degree days rate due to future warming will reduce the number of days of maize to reach maturity. The fourth one, we're looking at, we say days during the vegetative and reproductive phase of corn, with maximum temperature exceeding the critical temperature of 35 and less than the minimum temperature of 0 degrees will increase as we move to the distant future. And lastly, the deficit between potential evapotranspiration and precipitation at different maize growth stages will increase as we move to the distant future. So these are the hypotheses that we came up for this study. So this is the diagrammatic structure of the study. Like I said, I have two study locations, which are Bloemfontein, which is in Free State, one of the main maize producing areas, and Lichtenburg, which is also from Northwest another province where maize is produced in large numbers. But they differ in terms of rainfall. Lichtenberg receives more rainfall than that of Bloemfontein. In terms of climate data that we used for the study, we used two data scenarios, that is representative concentration pathway 4.5 and 8.5. And RCP is a greenhouse concentration trajectory that have been adopted by IPCC to describe different climate futures. So in this case, RCP 4.5, it shows it has a mitigation in it, whereas RCP 8.5, there's no mitigation. So we used 6 GCMs for this study. And then in those 6, we then took the averages, as we shall see in the next slide. So in terms of time scenarios, I had 3 baseline, near future, and far future covered in the years that are indicated. So in terms of adaptive measures, I used 4 planting dates and 2 cultivars for the study. So rate of accumulation of growing degree days, we used growing degree days, which is a thermal index that is used to estimate growth in plants as well as in pests during a growing season. And it's calculated as average temperature, subtracted the base temperature. And the base temperature is the temperature where growth ceases. So 4 planting days that I used 15 November and 15 December. 2 of those which are within the optimal planting days here in South Africa, in the 2 regions that I'm looking at. Then 15 January, it's late planting, and 5 February, it's very late planting. So 2 cultivars were used, and they have these 2 characteristics. We used a short season variety and a medium, and they differ in the number of days that they take to mature as well as to reach flowering. In terms of water deficit, the formula that we used is potential evapotranspiration subtract precipitation. And PET was estimated using the Penman-Monteith method, because we all, in the climate data, we had the variables that are needed in order to do this using the Penman-Monteith method. So growth stages were divided into 2: the vegetative, which from germination up to the reproductive period, and then the reproductive period, which covers from the start of vegetative, from the reproductive period to maturity. Daily PET and precipitation data were accumulated for each growth stage, and the difference was determined to obtain water deficit by location, representative concentration pathway, and climate model. So our results, we started by looking at the climate data from the 6 general circulation models that we used for the 2 locations and on the different time periods. Generally, the data set is showing us that on the 2 locations, on average, these locations will trend towards warmer climates. As you can see, the maximum temperature is increasing, going up as we move from the baseline to the far future period. This is the same with the average temperature as well as the minimum temperature. And this is quite worrisome because in most studies, when people normally look at the maximum temperatures, but even the minimum temperatures are also going up. And studies are also showing that minimum temperatures can have an impact on reproduction, as can be seen by these 2 studies that were done. This is showing the reduction in seed set upon exposure to high night temperature during flowering in maize. And it was done in China. Then there's another study which shows that night temperature silking affects set in maize. And so the increases in minimum temperature have an impact also on yield, and it will affect production. On the other hand, we looked at rainfall on the graph on my right, and it's showing that rainfall will seem to increase to a certain point, then start dropping as we get to the far future, to the distant future. This is true for all the locations as well as the 2 representative concentration pathways that I looked at. But the data set was also showing some large standard errors in the data, which shows that there's a large uncertainty in rainfall prediction. It's still, the models are still not able to predict well the rainfall, but this is what we have at the moment, and people are still, researchers are still working on improving that. Then in terms of, we also looked at annual freeze period. So we looked at the first winter freeze, and we saw that as we move from the baseline period to the far future, the first winter freeze is shifting to later planting dates. As you can see, it's shifting towards later planting dates. This is the same for the two locations. But when you go to the last spring freeze, which occurs around September, October, we see that the last spring freeze is regressing as we move to the far future period, which means that as we move to the future, the annual free period is predicted to increase, and the winter is becoming shorter and shorter. And this has been supported by studies that have also been done in the Northern Hemisphere. We also went on to analyze or to look at the days to maturity for maize, for the different maize cultivars that I was looking at different these different locations. So generally, the trends are showing that the maize maturity is decreasing as we move from the baseline to the far future. And as you can see with the November 15 planting date with the medium variety, the days to maturity are around 110 days. And as we move to the far future, they are decreasing to around 90, between 90 and 100 using RCP 4.5 for the two locations. And the decreasing trend is shown in all the planting dates. But what was quite interesting is when we put a line here, a red line here, we see that with the January 15 planting date, on the far future time scenario, we see that we can still have maintain the planting, the maturity days is the original, the ones that we have on the November planting date. And even on the February 5 again, we see that with RCP 8.5, we can still maintain that. So these two planting dates, especially the January 15, can be adopted in the future. We shall see that February 5 is limited because of frosts that occurs, because as we shall see in the slides to come. Then we also looked at the frequency count of temperatures greater than 35 degrees. Generally, we saw that at both growth stages, that is the vegetative period and the reproductive growth period, temperatures are increasing, irrespective of the RCP that has been used or climate scenario that has been used. But we can see that if we put a line here, January 15, the reproductive growth period, the temperatures are much lower than all the other planting dates, as well as the February 5. But you shall see again that the February 5 will not be suitable for planting in future because of it's limited due to lower temperatures. We also looked at water deficits and the trends. And our results showed negative, positive, or in non-significant directional change. With positive, negative sign was showing that precipitation is increasing at a higher rate than potential evapotranspiration. But with a positive sign, it means potential evapotranspiration was increasing at a higher rate than precipitation, and therefore the deficit will be stronger. So we saw that the negative signs, like the 15 January planting, had more of negative signs, which means that there was lower water deficits on the reproductive growing period, and this was the same with February farm planting date, the same with the January planting and the February planting date with the medium maturing variety. and compared to the other planting dates, which have more of positive, higher water deficits. So as I've been saying that January 15 is, from this study, is showing that it can be adopted in the future under future climate change. So we also looked at the occurrence of temperatures less or equal to 0, which leads to frost. And they are showing that there is the first 2 planting dates, which is November 15 and December 15, will not be affected by any frost. But when you plant in January 15 and February 5, you see that the reproductive period will be affected, is being affected in the current scenario. And as we move to the future period, we see a decrease. There's a decrease due to warming. And with January 15, there will be no these days will be less, and or in other scenarios there will be no more, except for the RCP 4.5, which is mitigation. So January 15 again, except for the RCP 4.5, it can still be seen as a day that can be adopted. But with February 5, we see that there's still higher number of days for frost. So for planting maize, you need a freeze-free period that allows you to grow your crop. So in summary, what we found out from these studies is that annual freeze-free period is predicted to increase in future, and it results in lengthening of the summer period, whereas the free-freeze period is increasing. Then there's a reduction in the days to maturity for both cultivars at all planting dates. There's going to be an increase in the number of days with maximum temperatures greater or equal to 35 degrees, and these are not good for our maize, and it results in yield reductions. Then there's also a reduction in the number of days with a T mean less than or equal to 0 degrees. And both cultivars will be affected more or less the same. That is why I did not mention much on how these cultivars will adapt in the future, because they are affected more or less the same. Generally, moisture availability is going to improve as we move to the future, leaving temperature as the most limiting factor to maize production. This is what we obtained from these results of this study. And considering the lengthened, all the variables that are looked at, that lengthened summertime, frequency count of days with maximum temperatures greater than 35 degrees, and temperatures that are lower than, say, 0 degrees, and moisture availability, we recommend that planting date can be shifted to the January planting at the distant future for both sides. And this brings me to the end of my my presentation. I would like to thank the CFBE and MPPI research groups from University of Pretoria and my funding board for their support. And I would like to a special mention to my to the collaborator that we're working with in this paper, an agriculture engineer, Dr. K. Gunn from University of Wisconsin, Green Bay in America, as well as my postdoctoral advisor, Dr. Nikki Crew, for her support. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Robert, for this very interesting presentation. There is, yeah, somebody wants a contact address. You can see it in the chat. Yeah, there are no questions so far, but I have maybe one before we move to the next presentation. I suppose the next step is having this connected to a crop growth model so that you can have predictions of yields into the future, or what is the next step?
Yes, that is what most research have done, and there are some within the project. There are other guys who are using models, so we want to see what if we put models, what exactly are we going to get, and in terms of yield, so that we can compare, because these the report that I gave, it's on individual factors, but when you run a model now, it takes into account everything, and climate change is so what can I say? It has so many factors that influence it. So it needs us even to run that model and get the yield at the end and see what we get in the future.
Okay, good.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Yes, thank you very much. Then I see he is also there. Parfait, Tapsoba. Then please, Parfait, can you go on stage and we will move to your presentation, please? There is Mr. Parfait. Okay. Thank you.
Hi,
Parfait.
everybody.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for being ready.
Okay, you're
While
welcome.
I introduce you, you can share your screen if you want.
Okay,
So Mr. Parfait is going to talk on improving smallholder livelihoods through third-party certification in Western Burkina Faso orchards. He's talking from research in Burkina Faso, although Parfait is from the University of Abomey-Calavi in Benin, which I know a little bit. So we see your screen. If you can just put your exactly.
okay.
Parfait. You have
Yeah.
the floor for 15 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, nice. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, nice. Thank you, all of you. Miam Tapsoba Kismentida Parfait. I'm from Burkina Faso, but I'm doing my research at Benin. So this work is about how to improve smallholders' livelihood through third-party certification in Western Burkina Faso orchids. So I will first do a short introduction, a theoretical approach, methodology, results, and discussion, and I will end with the conclusion. So, as an introduction, we can say that mangoes is produced in about 89 countries in the world, and it's a 15th largest fruit production of the world after the banana. In Burkina Faso, where economy is essentially based on the rural sector, apart from subsistence crops, fruit crops are the most important part of the rural world's activities. That way, mangoes are the dominant fruit crops and use more than half of the orchids of the country. So the mango supply can in that country is organized like that. At the grassroots, we have the mango farm, the mango producer, we have then the transporters, we have the processor and exporters. So more and more initiative aims to ensure farmers' income and sustainability of their activities are being undertaken by the exported. And among those initiatives, we have Rainforest Alliance certification, which is based on the sustainable production. So, as research question, we first ask ourselves what are the potential impacts of Rainforest Alliance certification for their producer. We also wanted to know what are the contribution of mango's income in the total income of Ranch Dikoba farmers. And finally, it was about to know what is the importance of mango production of these farmers' daily life. So, the study aimed to analyze, in general, the socio-economic impact of sustainable mango production for those farmers. Specifically, it was about to do a characterization of the farms, to also determine the Rainforest Alliance certified mangoes income and its contribution to the total income of farmers. We also determine how mangoes income contribute to improve farmers' household livelihoods. So for this, we use the adapted sustainable livelihood theory from Amekawa. This allowed us to to have some hypotheses we want to share with you. First of all, we assume that sustainable mangoes production contribute to the improvement of farmers' livelihood. We also assume that certified mangoes production have a high income that non-certified farmers. And finally, the studies was also based on the hypothesis that mangoes income substantially improve the living condition of farmers. So, the study has been carried out at Kenedougou, Oué, at Burkina Faso, especially in Joa, Kalmo, Nyanmo, Kelmo, Kinkengbe, Orodara, village at Kenedougou and Taga, Tapagodeni, Wempea, and Tusiana at Oué. So, we use two types of farmers. We use farmers with certified mangoes, and we also use farmers without certified mangoes in order to compare the income. So for data collection, we went through literature review. We also did primary data collection through group interview, semi-structural survey, and direct observation. As software, we used IBM for quantitative analysis and Microsoft to establish the operating account and generate the charts. As a result, this study showed that, first of all the farmers we met were married and they were male. The average age was 44, while the ethnic groups were Siamu at Orodara and Tusian at Tusiana. The average density in the farms were about 100 feet per hectare, and the farm size ranged from 2 to 20 at Orodara and 1.5 to 40 at Tusiana. In general, the agricultural practice we observe in those farms were comply with rainforest, global gap, bio, Tesco Nurture, Albertine, GRAPS, and DSCI certification standards. As practice, we observe crops, we observe mango, cashew, and citrus in those farmers. We also find 2 to 5 variety of mangoes within the field. As the income per variety, the findings show that about Kent, the variety Kent and Kate are the best one to which give a lot of money to farmers with around 320,000 per year. After that, we have the variety Amelie with around 1.5 thousand every year, and the two other variety, we mean Springfield and Brooks, are the least in providing income to farmers. We also showed in this study that the certified mangoes production provide to farmers about 30,000 per person per year, while in general, if we compare the income from non-certified farmers and certified farmers, we have a difference of about 100,000 every year. So, as for the household income, the results showed us that mangoes income represent about 20% of the household income in certified farmers' year's income. They use that money for generally social activities, schooling of children, food purchase, and building houses. At the end of the study, what can we say? We can say that overall, the findings shown us that sustainable mangoes production contribute to the improvement of farmers' living condition. This allows us to confirm our first hypothesis. We also noticed that certified mango producers have a high income than non-certified one. Due to that fact, we can also confirm our second hypothesis. As for the third hypothesis, it is also confirmed because the findings showed us that mango's income substantially improved the living condition of farmers. So, depending of what we saw in the field, and according to our results, we can state that for a better organization and the sector, and in order to increase the profit of stakeholders, it is good for government and non-government organizations to adopt a specific pricing and control policy. It is also good for them to support the creation of mangoes processing units. As for farmers, we think it's good for them to organize themselves in farmers organization, which can provide them much more opportunities to develop themselves and learn in group learning. So at the end of these studies, it could be better to analyze next time the income from certification over several years to make sure that the difference we observe between the non-certificate farmers and the certificate farmers is not due to the hazards. We also recommend to reconsider this study to analyze the impact of certification at the community level, especially regarding the management of the premium. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Parfait, for your presentation. We have still a few minutes, and I see there are two questions for you. I will read them.
Okay.
The first question is maybe a long one, but can you briefly explain to us what are the criteria to obtain certification?
Yes, of course. Thank you for that question. First of all, to obtain that certification, you have to comply with the standard of Rainforest Alliance certification, which is available online on Sustainable Agriculture Networks. We usually call it SAN. So SAN establishes a set of practices you should do in your farm in order to obtain the certification. So if you are a candidate for the certification, you have to make sure you comply with all those conditions, and you request an organization to come and see if you really comply with this condition. This is what they call in French audit. So they have to come and check on your practice, they check on your supply chains, and they make sure you comply with the standard. After that, they do a report, and if there is a need for you to correct some of your practice, you correct it, and they come and verify before they give you the certification. But earning the certification is not the end. If you earn it, you have to keep it. For instance, if a farmer earned the certification and he starts doing some bad agricultural practice, they're just going to cut it off.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Then there is a second question for you.
Yes.
And the question is whether your mango trees are used in an agroforestry system.
I beg?
That whether your mango trees, obviously it's a tree, so whether the use of mango trees in an agroforestry system, is the question. So I think a little bit of explanation on how your mango trees are grown is maybe asked.
Okay, the mango trees are growing in a very large area, but it's an agroecological system, agroforestry, because in the same field you have mangoes, you have citrus, and you also have annual crops like maize, like millets, and groundnuts.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Then maybe I have a final question on the profitability.
Yes,
You mentioned something like 30,000 francs. Is that correct?
yes,
That is per year per farmer, or how do I have to see that?
year per farmer. But if you want the analyzing the mango certification income is a bit complicated because sometimes in the field you find many farmers working in the same field, and
Yeah.
most of the time the field is a family field. So the amount we have to divide it by person
Yes.
working in that field.
But how much this 30,000? How much is that in euros? You know that more or less?
It is about 460.
460 euros. Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
and
That is that is
it is per year.
yes.
Mm.
So that means, well, we will not open the discussion here, but if you start to discuss about living income, that is still a big issue that is not solved with 450 euros. Eh?
I beg your pardon.
So if we start to talk about living income, yeah,
Yeah.
a profit of 450 euros, that's
Yes.
far away from having a so-called living income. Eh?
Oh, actually, what we have like right here is the benefits.
Yeah, but the benefits is what the family can use, no?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I
Thank you too.
so you can leave the stage, Parfait, if you want, and then we make floor for the next
Okay.
presentation.
Nice.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
Yeah. Emmanuel can go on stage, please. And while that is happening, I introduce Emmanuel Junior Zuza. He is from the Open University in the UK, and he will talk on climate suitability for the cultivation of macadamia in Malawi. And also he is using different climate change scenarios. So Emmanuel, please go on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Emmanuel Souza is from the Open University in the UK, and he will present on climate suitability predictions for the cultivation of macadamia. And that work is done in Malawi, and he will also present climate change scenarios. Emmanuel, you are all set. So please, you have about 15 minutes to go through this presentation, and people who have questions, please put them in the chat. Emmanuel, you have the floor.
Okay, sorry for the delay, everyone. So I'm a PhD student at the Open University School of Environment, Earth and Ecosystem Sciences. And today I will share our recent research findings on climate change and macadamia production in Malawi. So what really is macadamia? So macadamia is a perennial crop that is native to Australia, but does best in tropical and subtropical countries. And this image here on the left shows an example of a 10-year-old macadamia tree in Malawi. And the major producing countries are shown on the top right corner. And the biggest producing country is currently South Africa, seconded by Australia. But the African continent is the biggest producer in the world, with South Africa being the first, Kenya being the second, and Malawi being the third biggest producing country. Macadamia has different uses. So it is used, for example, as a food source in the confectionery industry for snacking, and also as additives to ice creams, cakes, butters. But also macadamia can be sold for other purposes. For example, processing into cosmetics, for example, shampoo and oils. And the shells can be used for heating. Recently in South Africa, they have been used as a water purification agent, but also they are fed to livestock and can be used as part of manure. So among the producers, macadamia is very lucrative. And the reason for this is because of the high demand for the nuts and the nuts products. And currently, a kg of macadamia sells at around 30 pounds per kg, which is very lucrative compared to most of the cash crops which are in Malawi. And in Malawi, the main cash crop and foreign exchange crop is tobacco. But with the negative market returns from this crop, the farmers are being encouraged to adapt or to grow other suitable alternatives. And macadamia has been identified as one of those crops. So here I'm just trying to outline the macadamia sector in Malawi. And as I said, it is the third biggest producer in Africa, and it is the seventh biggest producer in the world. And you can see that production has been growing year on year. And only in 2020, production was around 15,000 to 18,000 metric tons. Apart from that, we are also seeing that the area being invested in macadamia has been increasing in the country. And this is especially on the estate sector than the smallholder sector. But what we are seeing now is that smallholder sectors are beginning to harvest their nuts because the project for macadamia production in Malawi started around 2000. So production has been increasing, and the increase also in the total production is attributed to the smallholder farmers feeding into the markets. However, a study that was conducted in Malawi to understand the suitability of the crop was only done in 1980s. So there hasn't been any research that has looked at, for example, the impacts of climate change on macadamia production and how the trees are coping. And therefore, the reason why we decided to look at the factors that influence macadamia production to update the existing temperature and the research gap in Malawi. And this was mainly because macadamia, as all agriculture crops are, is sensitive to weather factors. For example, temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius result into premature nut drop, as shown by this image here. And too much of wind results into bending the trees, and that's affecting how the structure of the tree is and its interception to sunlight. But also, we have noted that too much of solar radiation results into flowers aborting. So there are these interactions where we wanted to understand specifically to know like what factors influence macadamia production, specifically in Malawi. We know that on a global scale, research shows that temperature factors are the main influencers of macadamia production. But we wanted to do this at a smaller level, at a Malawi level, given the different microclimates within the country. So the objective of this study was to identify environmental factors influencing macadamia suitability in Malawi, and then to predict the current suitable areas for macadamia production. And this is because macadamia is a long-term crop and requires a lot of planning. So for this to be successful, there is actually need to know where the areas the crop can be grown rather than just growing it anywhere. And the last objective was to explore the potential impacts of climate change in Malawi using climate simulation models. So in terms of the modeling procedure, obviously we needed to have occurrence points. Because we were focusing on understanding rain-fed macadamia production, in 2019, we collected production GPS coordinates throughout Malawi. This is shown by this map here. And for our environmental layers, we utilize the 19 bioclimatic variables provided by WorldClim version 2. But because these are highly multicollinear, we applied the variance influation factor to select non-collinear variables to avoid model biases. And then we thinned them to a tolerance of 5 kilometers. So for the GPS coordinates, we made sure that no area had occurrence points within 5 kilometer radius. And then we used cross validation where we were training the model to see which model was best in predicting the suitability for Malawi for macadamia production. So 70% of the occurrence points, which was 120 points throughout Malawi, was used as a training part, and 30% was for the actual testing. So for our modeling exercise, we decided to use the ensemble suitability model, which combines results from different species distribution model algorithms. And the reason for this was to increase the predictive accuracy of our results. And this is given by this formula where the ensemble model was the weighted average of the suitability over the weighted average. And then for future scenarios, we utilize the 17 global circulation models under 2 emission scenarios. That's emission scenario RCP 4.5 and emission scenario 8.5. So 4.5 predicts that by the 2050s, temperatures will increase by at least 1.5 degrees Celsius. And RCP 8.5 predicts that temperatures will increase by 2.6 or 2.8 degrees Celsius. And then we used the AUC, that's the area under the curve criterion, to see how the models were performing. So anything which has an AUC value of 0.5 to or 0.5 is considered as a chance, and then from 0.5 to 0.6 is a good model, and then 0.6 to 7 is a better, and then anything which is above 0.9 is as an excellent model in suitability. So the results we are finding is that first of all, we looked at the model fitting and performance, and based on our ensemble model, we had a good AUC value of 0.9. So the ensemble model was very accurate, and I would say the accuracy was better compared to individual models. And you can see like envelope model only had about 0.86, but because we took a weighted average for the results, that's why we are having the 0.9 AUC value. And this actually gave us the confidence to apply the model for the suitability of macadamia in Malawi. And the next thing what we saw was to look at the important factors that influence macadamia suitability in Malawi. And we found out that 60% of the environmental variables were precipitation factors influencing the suitability for macadamia. And this is Bio14, which is precipitation of the driest month. And in Malawi, this is between April to August. And then precipitation seasonality, which is Bio15, and then the other ones. And precipitation of the driest month contributed to around 32% to the suitability of macadamia. In terms of temperature factors, temperature seasonality and temperature isothermality. So temperature isothermality is Bio3 and temperature seasonality is Bio2, where the most important temperature factors influencing macadamia production. And when we modeled the results, we saw that around 57% of Malawi is suitable for macadamia production. And this is shown by the map on the left here. And most of the highly suitable areas are along the high altitude areas in the central, southern, and northern parts of the country. However, I should highlight that because the southern part is a lowland lying area, and the temperatures are already falling out the prescribed ranges for macadamia between 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. That's why you are seeing that the suitability was lower in the southern parts compared to the central and northern parts. The central part and the northern are highly suitable because most of them are mountainous and high elevated areas. So we all know that the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. And that is why we are seeing more suitable areas in the central and the northern part. And then we applied the emission scenarios, that's RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5. And what we are seeing is that by the 2050s, both using RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5, the southern part of Malawi will lose most of its macadamia suitable areas. And this is mainly because of the length of the drying season. And as I already said, the biggest factor influencing macadamia production in Malawi is precipitation of the driest month. And most of these areas in the southern part of the country are under the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So they are highly affected by that and receive less amounts of rainfall. And given that the drier months are also there, that is why we are seeing that suitability is going to be a big issue in the southern part. But we're also seeing losses in the central and the northern parts, but these are very minimal. And we can see that the southern part of the country will lose around 8.9% using RCP 4.5 and 9.2% using RCP 8.5. And the least to be affected by climate change is the northern part of the country, which receives better rainfall, but also geographical rain. And because of that, the drier months are not that severe. And with the increases in in temperature, it is estimated that those areas will move from being very cold to cooler areas, and that's why you are seeing the minimal loss in suitability. But in all, what is very alarming is that climate change will lead to about a loss of 17,015 kilometers of land that is suitable for macadamia production, and also 20,414 kilometers based on RCP 4.5. So this is something which is quite alarming and actually needs to be looked at to make sure that there is sustainable macadamia production, given that it is being promoted as an alternative to tobacco as a cash crop. But despite that, we are seeing that some areas will still remain suitable, and around 36,950 will remain suitable based on RCP 4.5, and around 38,000 will remain suitable based on RCP 8.5. And the reason is because most of the very cold areas that are not currently suitable for macadamia in the northern and central parts will become suitable. However, the areas that will be lost cannot be compensated by the areas that will be gained due to climate change. So there's actually need of climate adaptation strategies. So what are the conclusions from this study? So we are seeing that large areas of land, around 57%, that's 53,927 out of the 94,500 kilometers of land in Malawi, is currently suitable for macadamia cultivation. But extensive areas are predicted to lose suitability, and this is due to climate change. And we are seeing that the southern part of the country is the most vulnerable to lose suitability. And because most of the areas where macadamia is being predicted to be suitable are also used for agriculture, there is actually need to come up with better adaptation strategies. And one of the recommendations we are recommending is to promote agroforestry and intercropping as a way of climate change mitigation and adaptation. But we're also promoting farmers to start utilizing moisture conservation strategies to make sure that their crop has moisture during the drier season, since we have seen that precipitation of the driest month is the biggest factor influencing macadamia production. Thank you so much. This work has been published in Prose 1 in case there will be there are others who want to read more and understand what I'm talking about. So this is the publication. Thank you very much. I would like to thank my wonderful supervisors, Joseph Araya, Kadmi Masaik, Andrew Emmett, Shonu Bagwad for this work, and my collaborator, Kawe Disauza, for everything, and for all the smallholder farmers that helped me in collect the data, because this was done using a citizen science approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Emmanuel. Yes, there is some applause coming in. That is good. Emmanuel, there is one question that's maybe for people that are not so familiar with these IPCC scenarios, RCPs 4.5 and 8.5. For the sake of clarity, can you maybe briefly explain what these scenarios are doing?
Okay, so basically these scenarios are looking at the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So I'll just talk for easy understanding. We look at how much carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases are being emitted into the atmosphere. And then with that, we model, like, because of those emissions, how will the temperatures look like, or how will the weather factors look like? So because you are increasing, like, for example, RCP 4.5 is an intermediate scenario where we are saying that we are not we are not adopting some of the policies, but we are just trying maybe about 5 to 10% of the policies in terms of greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
So that is why it is put to say between 1.5 to 2.0 degrees Celsius temperature increase. But precipitation is something which is very hard to model, and we see that especially in Africa and for Malawi, there is a lot of variability in how the models work. So in some areas, it predicts that there will be droughts, whilst in other areas, it predicts that there will be too much rainfall and leading to floods. And the same applies to RCP 8.5. So this is the worst case scenario where we do not adopt any policies. We just continue living as normal as what is happening now, increase in population growth, industrialization, and everything. So that is why its temperatures and emission and greenhouse emissions are higher, more than around 800 parts per million, which also results into increases in global warming and temperatures. So that is how the emission scenarios work.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Then maybe short, if you can. There is a question, a double question. So can macadamia be grown with other important crops like maize and cow peas, for instance? Is mentioned, and the second question is, what is the access to markets of the smallholders to sell their macadamia? So which other crops and access to markets?
Okay, so I will start with other crops. So like currently, there's a study which was done in Kenya, and they have shown that macadamia can be grown with bananas and coffee. And in Malawi, there's ongoing study where farmers are growing the macadamia trees with the annual crops, and these are maize, sorghum, and groundnuts. And the main issue has to do with the spacing of the crop. And that is why for one of our recommendations, we're saying intercropping is a must on correct spacing, because if you don't space them correctly, then you might have light factors coming in. But that's something which has been done and is being conducted. In terms of the market access for smallholder farmers. So there are policies in Malawi which are promoting smallholder farmer crops to have market access. So 60% of the macadamia grown by the smallholder farmers is considered as grade 1. But also there has been investment in the smallholder macadamia sector in Malawi, where the farmers have been given grants to have their own processing plants. And one of the interesting policies, which I think most of African countries should try and adopt, is the one which is happening in Kenya, where all the macadamia in Kenya is first processed into finished products before it can be exported. So that is something which is happening. Yeah.
Okay, Emmanuel, thank you very much for your interesting contribution. May I ask you to leave the stage now, to push the leave stage button? And then I ask the admin people to launch the video of John Mekinda, and that is on climate change and cattle production in Nigeria, farmer perceptions of the effects and adaptation strategies in the derived Sahel zone. Okay, good. I suggest
good day
all
to
of
you
us.
all. My name is Makinde Olayinka John. I'm from Nigeria. I will be presenting my seminar on the topic, climate change and cattle production in Nigeria, farmers' perception of the effect and adaptation strategies in derived Sahel zone of Yobe State, Nigeria. Introduction. There's rapid increase in the world population, and this has led to increase in the demand for livestock products such as meat and milk. But unfortunately, the livestock industry is being threatened by the effect of climate change, which has led to scarcity of green pasture and water for the animals. It has also affected the consumption patterns, and it has resulted in death of a lot of animals. However, the perception of cattle farmer vary in Nigeria due to the differences in the adaptive strategies. These adaptive strategies is being determined by the level of education of the farmers, the experience and available resources. And most studies that have been carried out on the effect of climate change in the tropics have been done on crop production. So there's a need for us to carry out this research on livestock production. So therefore, the objective of the study is to determine the perception of the cattle farmers on the effect of climate change on cattle production in the Sahel Savannah ecological zone of Yobe State, Nigeria. Methodology. The study was done in Yobe State, Nigeria, and Yobe State has 3 ecological zones: the Yobe South, Yobe North, and Yobe East. And multi-stage sampling procedure was used for the data collection. All the 3 zones were selected, and 45% of the local government in each zone was selected in the second stage, giving a total of 7 local governments. And 2 communities were selected based on the large number of livestock farmers in those areas, and 10 respondents were selected from each of the 2 communities, giving a total of 140 respondents. And structured questionnaires were used during the interview, and the data generated were analyzed using descriptive statistics such as frequency count, percentage, mean, and standard deviation. Result and discussion. Figure 2A show that 100% of the livestock farmer in the study area were all males. And considering the ruggedness involved in the cattle production and the strength involved, it is a male-dominated activity. And figure 2B shows that about 58% of the cattle farmers in the study area have up to 1 to 20 years of experience. And this will result into the ability to manage the business and increase the profit for the farmers. Figure 2C shows that about 55% of the respondents are within the age of 40 to 59 years of age. And figure 2D shows that about 54% of the farmers have no formal education, and this might have affected the level of awareness and adoption of technologies. Table 1 shows the determination of perception of the cattle farmers on climate change, and the table shows that a large number of farmers strongly agree that climate change influenced the rearing seasons of cattle, followed by climate change determining the temperature of a cattle farm. And the least perception was that climate change determined the quality of beef in the meat market. Figure 3 shows the identification of the effect of climate change on farmers' cattle production. And the figure shows that high cost of feed was ranked highest as one of the effects of climate change on cattle production, followed by disease outbreak, low response to treatment, infertility, dehydration, and the last was reduced feed intake. Figure 4 shows the challenges facing the cattle farmers in the study area, and the figure shows that high cost of feed and crop farmers through admin clash were ranked highest as the challenges facing the farmers, and the least was inadequate extension service. Figure 5 shows the adaptation strategies adopted by cattle farmers in response to climate change, and provision of more water was ranked highest, followed by the provision of better hygiene, while the least adaptation strategies was the planting of trees around the cattle pens. Conclusions and recommendations. The farmers in the study area were aware of the effect of climate change on cattle production, and they have different adaptation strategies in the area. However, there's a need for government to support the cattle farmers through provision of a modern technological approach for effective production, most especially in addressing the challenges facing the farmers. And also there's a need for policy intervention that will support indigenous adaptation strategies, and more awareness creation on the effect of climate change on cattle production and adaptation should be created. And lastly, farmers should employ the expertise of professionals like veterinarians to manage the status of their cattle. I thank you very much for listening to me, and I want to appreciate Ghent African platform for this opportunity to present our research result here in Nigeria. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you very much.